Angie Ferry says, charging appropriately for your work as a maker is such a challenge in confidence and self-worth. We are all critical of our own work. How does one scale the cost of their work for the actual value rather than the self-perceived undervalue? I'm going to end up giving a piece of advice on this that will apply to many of the questions here. And hold on, sorry, I've got an itch in my back. That I'm going to apply to many of my answers here, which is part of the way you learn what to charge, what you learn what the market will bear, is talking to other people who are more experienced than you. And not everyone is going to share, unfortunately. But I believe in sharing. I believe not only in sharing, but I believe in supporting the beginners in their journey with the institutional knowledge that I have gleaned. There is no skin off my nose sharing everything I know about bidding to a young maker. And I've had my old shop assistant, Mel, came in here last year. She was doing a job and she asked me for advice about the specific parameters under which she was doing this job. And I turned out I had about like an hour and a half's worth of advice that she wrote down. And then later on, when we checked in, a whole bunch of it came into play. That was thrilling for me, thrilling conversation to have. And also to let her know where pitfalls would be. I was like, the client's probably going to do this, and here is how you respond to that. And the client's going to ask for this, and here is how you respond to that. And here are the parameters you can offer. All of that stuff is really useful. And frankly, the internet is amazing for being able to find groups of people with which to confer with. I mean, I spend a lot of time on the Practical Machinist website. And there's wonderful threads there from home machinists asking experienced machinists, what do I bid for a job like this? How do I build this out? What do I do with this client? And the self-perceived undervalue. Okay, so this is the thing of like, that's a hard one to get past. And a lot of that, part of the self-perceived undervalue is when you make something, you know all the mistakes that are inherent in it. And when you're charging someone money for that, you end up feeling bad about every single one of those mistakes. And I want to say you don't have to feel bad about them. You do want to set expectations with your client when you're starting a job so that the overall quality parameter is met and is agreed upon and then met, but you don't have to. Doing work for hire is always adjusting your decision tree for the compromises of time and money. It really is, and it's really like the most important thing I would say to do with the client at the front is set their expectations accurately for what they are going to get. Whether that means you make a mock-up and you show them a finish, or you have color chits and you show them, or all sorts of clients can be idiotic in all sorts of ways. The number of times I've shown a client a gray primered spray painted piece that is just, and I've said, this is not for color, it's only for form. And the first thing the client says is, yeah, I just don't like the color. Every freaking time, every time. The clients are always going to say things that will make you wonder if they've paid attention to a single thing you have said. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You ask about the self-perceived undervalue. Your time is worth money. Your time is worth money, and that's what you're getting paid for. And your time is applied towards making an object. It's not making a perfect object, one, because there's no such thing, but two, because it's an unachievable thing unless someone's paying you millions of dollars to do something. But the time you spend doing that is the value you're bringing to solving this problem. And in the beginning, you'll charge less for your time because your time is the asset you have the most of. In your early 20s, man, it feels like you got nothing but time. I remember I used to like go to the bank and then go to the dump and then go to the store and buy some stuff. That was like 3 errands in a day. Today, one of those will knock me out and I need a nap afterwards. But the fact is when you're young, time is your most abundant asset, and materials are the most expensive. Later on, that whole relationship inverts, and the materials become the cheapest part, and your time becomes your most valuable asset, and something that you have to charge a premium for. Another way to that self-perceived undervalue, it's set at a level, and it's probably more of an emotional level than an actual level. And again, exposing yourself to other people doing similar stuff is the best way to understand where the actual level is. Your perceived idea of what is perfect and imperfect is often useless to you at the beginning of your career because you just don't have the institutional knowledge. But hang out with other makers in a makerspace and see what they are building and what they are charging for, and it really helps bring you to a realistic level. There's a lot of emotional involvement in making something and then charging someone money for the thing that you made. It feels weird. And the first few times you do it, it feels like wow, someone gave you a check for something that you made. It feels like you cracked some code. I mean, because you did. And that's totally real. Angie Ferry, I don't know that I've fully answered your question because I know that there's all these assumptions in there, but I think that as I answer some of these other questions, I'll also get to some essential parts of this. Andy Butler, 9072. When you first started making, did you ever question if it was the right choice to turn your passion into your career? How do you separate things you enjoy from your work? No. I noticed something when I first started working in commercial special effects. And again, this is like 93. I am 26 years old. And this is the first time I'm doing something where I realize I'm really good at this. I get this. I get what it means to have a career because I can see that everything I've ever learned is feeding into this. And I seem to be fast at this. This feels like a career. And then after about 6 months of that, I noticed that I was not doing what I formerly had done in all of my employment, which was going home and making stuff all night. I was working all day at Jamie's shop and then going home and watching movies. I wasn't making stuff all night long. And when I examined it, what I realized was the work I was doing for Jamie was feeding that creative problem-solving part of my brain to a degree that I didn't need to exercise it on my own art. And if you've worked in the film industry, you know that the film industry is packed with people who say, I used to be an artist. And I don't like that definition. I don't like, well, I used to be an artist and now I work in this industry. And the thing is, I didn't take it personally that I was using my creative part of my brain in the service of employment because the employment was so satisfying. And I was making really good money. I mean, I was working in the theater industry, making $12 an hour, and I started working for Jamie, and it was like a 30% raise right up front. He was paying me $17.50 an hour, right out of the gate. So for me, the problem solving within employment has always been very satisfying within this making. That's not for everybody necessarily, but that has worked for me. I still now I get to build whatever I want. I feel like I'm operating with a cheat code. But back then I made this decision never to say I used to be an artist. I used to be a designer. Because I could see that the same parts of my brain were being used. And not just brain, but when you're doing creative output, you're using part of your soul, seriously. And I mean that word with all of the weight that it actually has. And I don't think that it's, I had people back then, I had a really close friend who thought of me as a sellout for working in commercial effects. And that's their prerogative. They can think of me as a sellout. But I found that my whole life was better when I was doing something for employment that was creatively satisfying to me. And I was a better partner, I was a better dad, I was a better person. And again, that's my personal experience. And also my sensitivity to the emotionality of creative output comes from having grown up with an artist, watching them do this mysterious thing that they had to do, that they didn't show, that they didn't talk about. That was my dad. My dad painted 5-6 hours a day for my whole childhood. And for all of his complications, that example of seeing someone do something that was important to them, that fed them for no reason other than the doing of it, gave them something, that's a huge leg up for me creatively in being able to pay respect to that process. I have often said in the past that I cannot imagine how I would have turned out if I'd grown up in a creatively stifling household where I was judged for wanting to do these things that I wanted to do. And any creator I ever meet who came out of an adversarial childhood, my hat is off to them because they've had a way harder road to hoe than I have. This is hard stuff. There is no specific roadmap, and most of the things you learn the hard way. There's a phrase, all rules are written in blood, and it is absolutely true. All institutional knowledge is written in blood, sweat, and tears. All three of those, and they will all happen to you. What your goal is to let it happen to you less. And that as you get better at what you do, that happens to you less and less and less. And that is the grace of having institutional knowledge and confidence in the work that you do.